Sure. Thank you. Mike, thanks for being here to testify. I know this is a big issue that's being discussed. I personally, and I know a number of my colleagues have grave concerns with this legislation and where it's heading. One area I wanted to talk to you about is even if you talk about the bill is silent on nuclear. I think there's a great understanding if there's any way we're going to even come close to meeting our these ambitious goals, nuclear has to be a part of the equation. And how does it also address the issue of reliability? Because even the NISO chairman has said that there are significant reliability gaps as we move forward, as we get closer to 2040, with unidentified dispatchable emission-free resources. Nuclear would be one of those things, but wind and solar isn't going to do it enough on its own. Where do you stand on that aspect of it? Do you believe nuclear should be a part of that equation? And also, as a follow-up, there's no shortage of people bidding, the private sector bidding on these RFPs from NYSERDA. And then bring NYPA into it, that's just going to make things more difficult and more costly. If there's no shortage of these biddings and the problems with interconnection, how do you address that about nuclear? And then the fact that the private sector has been bidding on these RFPs that come from NYSERDA, so there's no shortage of bidders. It's just a matter of the interconnection issues. And I can go to Laurie, Ben, or anybody.
I can weigh in. Thank you for the questions, Assembly Member. On the question of the types of generation, we believe that any new generation, public or private, should be limited to that of which is defined in the current climate law, the renewable energy definition defined in the climate law, which does not include nuclear. In terms of interconnection, this is something that I did raise in our testimony. It is an issue, probably one of the biggest impediments to the development of renewables in this state, and something that does need to be taken on, whether it's privately or publicly developed.
And I know that the NISO chairman had said that advanced nuclear is something that we should be looking at. We need to be looking at all things to meet those goals. Wind and solar alone is not going to meet it, even with the storage, because the technology is there. We do not have the technology of the dispatchable emission-free resources, but yet we continue to shut down reliable sources of energy. So why would we go down that front? And again, making it public and letting the NYPA get involved when there are sufficient individuals bidding on these programs right now, and then they take on the risk, versus if NYPA, that gets passed on to the ratepayers through higher costs. Exactly what you're going to see with the Quebec line, it's going to be shifted onto ratepayers to pay for that.
Anybody can answer.
I'm happy to go next. So I'd like to point out, starting with the Build Public Renewables Act, that the sponsor has been making amendments throughout time. It's at a deprint now. In particular, we thought the most recent set included some good safeguards, right? And that's important. Having this discussion today is important to make sure that they are, strong and that we have a plan of action. So one of the things that Pope appreciates is the climate resiliency planning purpose, coming up with something in writing, having that state plan for 10 years, having stakeholders at the table, so we can look at different regions as well and say, okay, maybe this project here, maybe there's a private project as well. And having those broader discussions are essential, because if we're going to open it up and have more public renewables along with the private, we're going to have to create some sort of balance out there. And so I think the bill does recognize the need to have discussions, while also recognizing that NYPA does have this history and experience that they can kind of build off of.
Anyone else want to comment from that perspective? Otherwise, I'll just ask the question. I mean, again, we have an abundance of private sector developers that are bidding on these RFPs. June 2nd, the governor listed a number of them. I think it was like 28 just the other day. The largest solar field project in New York was just announced. What's the need for NYPA to get involved with this? And given their history, I mean, not really developing renewable technology in quite some time. And then that cost, cost overruns and things of that nature, which you have a history of, that's going to be passed on to and absorbed by them, the ratepayer, obviously, and not when private, it's absorbed by the private. Any other comment on that?
I'll jump in briefly. Regarding the cost being passed on to the ratepayer, NYPA already does provide utilities to about 50 towns and villages in New York State, and they pay a lot less for their utilities than the rest of the state. I can definitely say that as someone in New York City paying a really unaffordable amount for utilities this summer. And regarding the bidding by private solar, the successes of the CLCPA will not be measured based on the bidding and the hypothetical activity. They'll be measured based on a reduction of emissions, and we're nowhere near on that path. It's not happening. We're behind New Jersey and other neighboring states, and I can't speak from the perspective of private renewables as to exactly why that is, but I can say that we're not doing well. We're not on the way to meeting the CLCP mandates with private solar and wind. And this will allow NYPA to step in where no one else is stepping in. It no longer gives NYPA first rate of offer or refusal, but it does allow NYPA to step in and meet this need that is mandated under the current law, the CLCPA.
Thank you. We're going to move on.